Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. When John and Don first emailed me about this, actually Don just emailed me the other day and he said, hey, I've got good news for you. You're in the lead-off position. And for those of you who have been to a comedy show, you'll know that the lead-off position is usually the weakest comic of the lineup. And in a relay, it's usually the slowest person of the relay. So I don't know where the good news was. They always tell you to start off something with a joke, so we'll do that. I do, as Don mentioned, I do write a little bit of stuff for television, so I read the news a lot. And then I don't know if anybody saw this, but recently there was an article in the news about a woman who was 114 who passed away, and the last line of the article said that an autopsy was planned. And I thought, there's no way you could eyeball that one, huh? You really think we need to do something to try to pinpoint this? How about you hand me the chart and I'll figure that out in about 2 seconds for you. Oh, I see what happened. She was born in the Cretaceous period. We'll list the cause of death as climate change. Does that work for everybody? It's very good to be here. I will tell you a little about myself. I've been doing stand-up for, close to 20 years now. And everybody always wonders, they always want to talk to you about where the comedy comes from. And that's, I think a lot of people, a lot of comics will tell you that it starts at a very young age. I know for me, I was influenced, the greatest comedic influence I have in my entire life was my dad. My dad was an unbelievably funny person. And he was very quick-witted, very smart guy, made all of his friends laugh all the time. But I think more than that was the stuff that he introduced my brothers and I to. Because it was the things like the comedy movies that he would watch. We watched, everybody else was watching That's Incredible. We were watching Monty Python. So those are the kinds of things we did. And the albums he used to listen to. I mean, like, we're Bill Cosby fans. Yes. Bob Newhart fans. All those kind of things. Rodney Dangerfield. And then if you want to get a little dirtier, George Carlin. Some of the hands go up, some of the hands go, I don't think I'm supposed to admit to that. Those are the kinds of things that we listen to. Now, my dad didn't, I'm not going to say that, my dad at 6 years old had us listening to George Carlin. That's not the case. Although we knew where the George Carlin album was, and the second he left, we were listening to George Carlin. But it's just having laughter around the house. That was a huge part of my existence growing up, because I was the youngest of 4 boys. I have 3 older brothers, and all of them were much bigger than me growing up. So it was very physical, a lot of athletics going on. And it really didn't matter what situation you were in, you were going to get punched somehow. So I learned at a very early age that if I could say something about Mark that would make Andy and John laugh at him, I knew I was going to get punched. But still, there was that way. I knew I had a way in. So comedy was very, very big in our house growing up. I do a joke. I'm going to intersperse jokes here, and I'll tell you why I'm going to intersperse jokes. Last year, I had to do career day at my daughter's school for 7th grade, and they told me right off the bat, they said, we're not looking for a comedy show. We're looking for you to talk about the business and academic aspects of comedy. For 7th graders. They sent me letters saying, boy, the comic wasn't very funny. So we're going to throw some jokes in there. I do a joke in my act about being the youngest of 4 boys where I say that naturally as the youngest, you have to wear a lot of hand-me-down clothing. And I'm 5'7". 2 of my brothers are 6 foot. One of them is 6'3". So the pants fit beautifully. And people would say to me, hey, kid, you know your pants are on inside out? Those are cuffs. Roll these up a little ways. So comedy was a huge part of my life growing up. And I think very early on you realize if you're going to be a comedian, you start to think back on that stuff and you think, I've always loved to make people laugh. I've always liked to say funny things. The ironic thing is, and I think you'd find this from most comedians, actually in high school, I was not the class clown. You always see the class clown, the guy who's, putting a tack or a whoopee cushion on somebody's chair. You think, oh, that's going to be a funny guy. Most of the comics are in the back of the room making fun of that guy under their breath. That's who most of us are, because we kind of realize there's a different angle you got to come from. That's obvious humor, tacks on a chair, right? So I was not the class clown. I tell you, but I was always good at making parents laugh. Girlfriend's parents always seemed to like me because I could make them laugh. Made my parents laugh, made teachers laugh. Let me give you some advice, though. If anybody out there is funny, that doesn't always work in a marriage, okay? If you're trying to get away from trouble by making people laugh, that lasts for about a year into the marriage, and then your wife is onto you, and it's pretty much over. The cover's blown. I've been married, actually. Is everybody married? Who's married? Half the people listen to Carlin and Pryor on this. I've been married for 19 years, and it's a good marriage. It's tough. Can we agree marriage is tough? Everybody, yes? It's work like anything in life, huh? My parents got divorced after 41 years. That's the longest game of chicken ever. This is another joke from the act. You can write this down. You can use that one if you like. My wife and I, we've got a very good marriage, solid marriage. We had our rough points for a while, though. I will tell you that. There was a point in our life where we had to see a marriage counselor. I don't know if anybody's had to do that. It's none of our business, but I will open up to you about the people. It's very expensive. And the first thing they do in the first meeting is they want you to open up and see if you know the problem is, huh? I'm paying this woman a lot of money, but I have to figure it out. And she said to me, she goes, "What is it, Dave? What sets her off? What really makes her angry?" I said, "As far as I can tell, oxygen." I held her underwater for a little while, but she is much stronger than she looks. So, I went to Michigan State. Any Spartan fans? Yes, a few of us. I went to Michigan State. Boo, thank you very much. Good to be here. You're just upset you had to be here today. I see this guy in the morning. I went to Michigan State. I studied acting and directing. Had friends who did stand-up comedy at Michigan State, but I did not try it. It was one of those things, it's a very scary thing to do stand-up. And I think it's because it's a very revealing thing. I mean, you were the only one on stage. You know, the great thing about being in a play was that I knew if I flubbed something up, there were 2 or 3 other people on stage who could kind of help me cover. And I played drums in a band. I knew if there was, I was behind a drum set, so there's a little bit of a wall between me and the rest of the crowd. But that's the thing I love about stand-up. If you watch stand-up, it's one of the truest forms of justice in the entertainment world because it is just you. There's nobody else up there. And it's not something that somebody else has created. It's something I've created. And I think that's one of the things that drives me so much, to know that I can get up in front of a room of 200 or 300 people that I've never met in my life and tell them a joke that I wrote probably sitting in my boxers in the living room. And they're either going to find it funny or they're not. And I've been doing stand-up for so long, there's very few nerves that come into performing, but you're always nervous when, even if it's a 30-second joke, when you've got a new joke, you have no idea how it's going to work. But I think that's one of the great things, that's one of the things I like about stand-up, because it's such a microcosm of life. I mean, that's life, really, isn't it? I mean, if you don't go up there and do something you've never done before and just present it to people, you're never going to know. So that's one of the reasons I started doing stand-up. I was 24 years old, and I said to my wife, I said, "Look, I've wanted to do this my whole life. I'm going to give it a try. It's either going to work or it's not." And the only way you do stand-up when you start out is to do what's called open mic nights. I'm sure you guys have heard of that. Maybe if you've gone to comedy clubs, you've witnessed it. It can be an entertainment disaster. Because you're given 3 or 5 minutes to go up there and do something you've never done before in front of people you don't know. And I will tell you this, the first time I ever did stand-up, it was in Lansing, Michigan, and I worked so hard on those 5 minutes. I put everything I had into those 5 minutes. Rehearsed it, memorized it, had the timing down. Got up there, killed. Which that's the funny thing about comedy. There's only 2 terms. You either kill or you die. Those are the 2 things in comedy. That's the rating. And kill is good. Die, not so good. So I got up there, and it just went fantastic. And that was the worst thing that could have happened my first time. Because I walked off stage thinking, it's a piece of cake. Anybody can do this. So the next week, I had about 5 minutes of preparation into my 5 minutes. And I went up there, and it was like a lake on a cool autumn morning. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was flat. Nobody laughed. Walked off stage, and that was the best thing that could have happened that week, because that's when you realize if it's something you love and something you're passionate about, it is going to take a long, long time to get good at it. And that's what comedy is. It's, again, another microcosm of life. It is. I've been doing stand-up for, like I said, almost 20 years, and I will tell you honestly, in the last 3 or 4 years is the first time in that long of a career where you kind of start to feel you're really coming into your own, and you feel like, you know what, I know who I am. I know when I say things on stage that I'm it's coming from me. It's not something I'm making up about somebody else. And it takes, you listen to guys like Jerry Seinfeld, all guys like that, they're like, it takes 10 or 15 years to get to that point. So what I'm saying, if anybody's starting to think about comedy, nobody's thinking about comedy either. It's going to take a long time. This is under Know Your Crowd. This is what you want to... But it takes an awful lot of persistence, and there is a ton of rejection. There is a lot of, you're trying to get into clubs, you're trying to do all sorts of things you want to keep going up that ladder. And one of the great things, I think one of the life lessons that comedy has taught me is to accept, they talk about, in the video, just accepting and letting failure happen. You have to understand, and I think this is a great lesson for life, is that not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to... Comedy is very subjective. Not everybody is going to be on the same page with you. I've got clubs, big name clubs that I work at. I've got smaller name clubs. There's a club in Wisconsin I tried to get into for 2 years, and the guy was just like, no, I'm just not seeing it. I just don't think he's very funny. And you just have to accept that. If you watch a lot of comics, I'm always amazed by the comedians who will say things like, if I'm looking out at the crowd and I'm performing and there's one guy who's not laughing, I want to know why that one guy's not laughing. And I will tell you that I wrote that guy off a long time ago. Because you have to understand not everybody is going to like you. But you have to stay true to who you are and what you're going to write and all kinds of things like that. One thing I want to also talk to you about is, people often ask me about how you come up with material, what the formulation of a joke is, where do you find the comedy, and the simplest structure of a joke is, and it could be applied to storytelling, just punchline jokes, whatever, is that you got to take the audience down the road, and then you lead them down so that they think they know where it's going, and then right at the end you take a left turn. That's what comedy is. Comedy is looking at the same stuff that we deal with, all of us deal with every day, and just coming at it from a different angle, and then ending the story a little different. I'll give you an example. A joke I used to do in my act about my daughters. I've got 2 daughters who are now 14 and 17, so please, give me some space for that one. But when they were younger, I used to do a joke about how much you love kids. Who has children here? Everybody? Not everybody, but... It's amazing, isn't it? Because the range of emotions that you experience with children. I love my daughters more than anything, and people will tell you there's no love like the love that you have for a child. But there's also the other side, isn't there? I've never been so angry at a human being in my life. Like right now, my 6-year-old owes me money. And you feel bad shaking them down when they're 6 because... she's 6, right? The only source of income that kid has was her teeth. That's it. And I used to tell her, she used to tell me, look at this one's wiggling, just give me another week or so. And I'm like, you know what, that's what you said last week, all right? A week later, I had her pinned up against the wall, going, bite the apple, Daddy needs his money, all right? Everybody's, ooh, that's... It is fun, though. The thing is, though, it's one of the things, again, in life, one of the things you have to define about yourself as a comedian is you've got to figure out your point of view. And I think you have to do that in life, too. You've got to figure out, not only as a performer, you have to figure out, what am I about? What do I feel about things? Do I want my opinion to come out? What shapes me and what shapes my mind and my decisions? And I think that's true in life. I think, comedy has helped me just become, a confident person in that, I know who I am, I know where I'm coming from, and, I know what kind of decisions I'm going to make and what I need to do. It's a grind. It's a lot of work. You're constantly trying to get, bookings. You're trying to get, managers, agents, things like that. And there's a lot of people out there doing it, so you got to be different so that somebody sees you. A lot of times people ask me, what is the greatest reward of doing comedy? And I will tell you that, like all comics, I'd love to have a sitcom. I'd love for you to tune in Tuesday night and see Dave Dyer's house. I'd love that. And, I'd love to do big shows. But I will tell you without question, the biggest reward that I get out of doing comedy is just making people laugh and releasing them from other stuff that they're doing. About a month ago, I did a show in Buffalo, New York. And I did 2 shows. There was a show, the guy came up to me afterwards, and he pulled me aside, and he said, I got to tell you, he said, I had probably the worst week of my life. And I can't tell you how much I needed this. And I can't thank you enough. And that, to me, that's worth everything, right? That's worth the drive over to Buffalo just to know, and not for my own ego. I don't care about that. Just to know that this guy had an awful week, and for an hour, he got to forget about it. I mean, I think that's one of the great things about comedy. So go to your local comedy clubs. Go to Dr. Grin's and stuff like that and laugh for an hour, right? Just get out and have some fun. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much. My name is David Dyer. I'm on the web. Wherever you want to go, just look for me, okay? Thank you very much, folks. I appreciate it.